Hi again, everybody. I'm getting ready to. There's this weird text. I don't know. Hello, Shannon. It's me again from the future. Everything's so bad here. I can't write much longer. Electricity's gone. My battery's dying. Don't do the wingles? Some kind of a typo in there. Video. Or we all. D? No idea. And then it just drops. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. I guess I don't know what that means. I've been getting these weird cryptic texts and messages all over the place about not doing videos ranking players. So that being said, I sat down and I went over the wingers list today and gave myself a bit of a headache looking at it because there are so many good wingers in the league. And at some point I'm gonna have to go back to like the 90s and get a list put together so I can show you guys like the amount of top tier talent in the NHL has probably never been stronger than it is right now. This is why growing to 32 teams makes sense, and the possibility of growing beyond 32 teams may at some point be something the NHL can't refuse. A lot of money in it if they don't. I understand why people say don't do it. Totally get that, but at the same time, you've got what, 7 teams in Canada? You've got soon to be 25 in the States. There are leagues with 32 American teams that are doing well in the States. Not many, and you can argue about whether or not it's a complete success, but again, expansion's for another time. Honorable mentions for the wingers list, and again, this was really tough. Matt Tkachuk, Philip Forsberg, Jeff Skinner, and Jacob Voracek. Skinner was the toughest one to cut. Skinner, you can look at the 40 goals and you can say he belongs there. I can look at that and say there were large swaths of the season where his scoring was non-existent and it hurt Buffalo. I can also look at his career average and say he's more of a 30 than a 40 goal scorer, and he probably goes back to his average goal totals, which again are 30 and they're substantial, but his points totals aren't as high as you might expect. And again, this is a really tough list to get onto. That being said, I'm going to give this a shot. And again, I went over this list a few times like, okay, I think we got this. Number 20. Starting with Nashville. Nashville's been pretty popular in this, except in goal, where Nashville fans get upset about Rene not being in there, but I get that. Victor Arvidsson for me is in at 20. Now, if he'd played the full season and didn't deal with the injuries this year, he'd likely be top 10. He could have scored 50 this year. Victor Arvidsson is a fantastic player, a lot of intensity. He is a heart and soul player, and I really, really like him. I really, really do. And I would be very surprised if he's not higher up. Forsberg's not on this list because his totals suffered due to injury as well. And that's one of those things. That's why every year I could do this, and the list is probably going to change quite a bit. So for Arvidsson at 20, again, you're trying to take all the left wingers and right wingers and rank them. It gets kind of tricky. Number 19. Another goal scorer here. Vlad Tarasenko. So the Blues win the Stanley Cup. Tarasenko wasn't a major part of that for a lot of that run. And he had a good year. He did. But Tarasenko still has those scoring droughts. And, again, the Blues winning the Stanley Cup, it was defense, it was structure. Ryan O'Reilly ends up getting the Conn Smythe, and Binnington was fantastic in net. Tarasenko, he should be up here. Tarasenko has the ability to score 50 goals every year. The guy's absolutely amazing. And when he's on and when he's performing really, really well, he could be up in this area, but it's not consistent. Number 18. Florida, Jonathan Huberdeau. So Huberdeau had an excellent season statistically. He was fantastic. The thing with Huberdeau is his year by year, we'll see if he's able to maintain that. If he has another year like he did this past season, he'd be higher up. And then there's Florida's not getting in the playoffs. I've talked about how that wasn't on the forwards necessarily. And I want to see if it's more Barkov helping Huberdeau or Huberdeau and Barkov in tandem. That's where it gets tricky with lists like this. So I know there's going to be Florida fans saying I got Huberdeau too low. I may very well have him too low, but I also had to look at, like, okay, this guy might not get as many points, but he's more physical, or he's more, he's better at other parts of the game, and it gets really tricky. Number 17, going to the Winnipeg Jets, and Kyle Connor. And no, Patrick Laine did not make the list. Laine, he had the great November and then the inconsistency around it. And I know people are going to say, well, he was injured. That doesn't count. He's still great. Okay, but I can't put him on the list for what he might have done. I can't put him on the list saying, well, he'll get back to that next year. Because there is any number of seasons that I can point to that players have had where pundits and fans will say, it's okay, they'll get it back next year. And then they don't. Or that is the new normal. So for me, Connor had a great year. Between he and Laine, he is the player I would rather have on my team. He was very consistent. And when he's not scoring, Connor is still doing little things you need in order to win hockey games. Whereas Laine was miscast at times this year and defensively was more of a liability. And again, that could change next year. But for right now, I have Connor in and I don't have Laine in the list. Number 16. Taylor Hall was in the midst of a pretty good year with New Jersey, but it was a down year from the year before. And Devil fans said, hey, he had a great second half and he really picked it up later. So don't talk too much about how he's doing in the early season. And then, of course, he gets hurt. Taylor Hall, for me, had a career year. Obviously not this year where he got hurt. The year before is a career year. Look more towards his average. I would expect this season probably about 85 points. Now, based on the fact it's a contract year, he might hit 100. But for me, Taylor Hall at 16, I'm fine with that. I had debated about whether or not to put him on the list because he only played 30-some games. And I thought maybe it would make more sense to have Tkachuk, Forsberg, Skinner, or Voracek on the list rather than Hall. But I couldn't bump Hall completely off the list since his points per game were pretty good on a team that really couldn't score. So that's the reason why he stays on the list for me. Number 15. Back to the Jets. Blake Wheeler. Wheeler seems to be getting better as he gets older, which belies the whole argument that the league keeps getting younger and it's a league about youth and youth and youth. Blake Wheeler just continues to seemingly get better. I don't know how many points I expect from him this year. I'd say probably about 80, 75 maybe. He is part of that very deep top six that you have with the Winnipeg Jets. A top six which there's still some debate about whether Ehlers is going to start, and if Ehlers ends up being out of there, Laine has to be in the top six this coming season, but Wheeler has been fantastic. And again, he seems to keep getting better. His leadership and everything that he does for Winnipeg, for me, leaves him this high on the list. Number 14. There's been a lot of jokes about Claude Giroux made. Where's Claude Giroux on the centers list? Where's Claude Giroux on the defense? And where's Claude Giroux on the goaltending? And that goes back to last summer when I had Claude Giroux as one of the best centers in the league, coming off of a season where he primarily played the wing. So a lot of fans got kind of ticked off and like Giroux doesn't play center, so clearly you don't watch the game. And the reality is, Giroux took a lot of faceoffs. And in looking at his overall stats, it never occurred to me that this guy takes hundreds and hundreds of faceoffs. He clearly doesn't play center. So Giroux I've got on the wing this year. I've got him at 14. His stats last year would have had him higher. His stats this year fell more back to earth. He's a very good player. He's a point-per-game guy. Reliable. And again, remember, this is left and right wing combined. I decided not to do left and then right wing. Here's why. There's a lot of players who play both wings. Not only that, but Giroux can play center. So you've got players that can play both wings and center, and it's easier than just doing left wing and right wing. If you look at the voting for the All-Star teams, where they do first and second team All-Star, you will routinely see players get votes for both wings and sometimes both wings and center. Leon Draisaitl, for instance, got votes in every position up front because writers may not know what position he's playing, and so they vote on whatever position they think he plays. So I've got Giroux here. Number 13. I went back and forth on this one. Artemi Panarin for me is at 13. Yes, you could make an argument that Panarin belongs as low as 16th. I could not bump him down further than 16th, and I couldn't bump him up higher than 13th. Panarin, who's joining the Rangers, making a ton of money. The only reason that I say that I think Panarin is overpaid comparatively to other wingers is because, of course, that's the newest contract. That's just the going rate. But I do think the Panarin contract is going to cause unrealistic expectations. I think that contract combined with adding Trouba and spending $20 million on the two, I think it's going to add an unrealistic expectation of what the Rangers could be this year. We'll probably see that from the media, so if they struggle out of the gate, watch for everybody to hit Panarin and Trouba, and what's wrong with these guys? Why can't they turn us around? So Panarin, for me, very good winger, solid player, coming off of a career high in points, and we'll see whether or not that total goes up with the Rangers. I'm thinking it probably drops by a few points, but we'll see. Number 12, and I went back and forth on this one too. So I talked about how Tarasenko had a challenging season, and then during the playoffs, he really wasn't a reason that St. Louis got there. And you can say, well, he had a game-winning goal here and there, and he had a big goal here. But then you look at when he had those droughts. Pasta is a player like that with Boston. Pasternak looked like he was playing hurt for a large part of the playoffs. And the perfection line, as it was called, stupid name. Honestly, Pasta was invisible a lot. He got dropped to the second line quite often. So despite his totals from the regular season being pretty darn good, and he's young and he's trending in the right direction, I thought there were some things that happened during the playoffs where I said I can't have him in the top 10. I can't put Pasta in the top 10 because during the playoffs, he really wasn't a driving force that got the Bruins to the Stanley Cup Finals when you would expect it. You would expect Pasta to be playing his best hockey for them to get to the finals, and that really wasn't the case. It was Boston's depth, it was their goaltending, and Pasta, there were some nights where he was pretty quiet by his own standards. Number 11. So this is outside the top 10. Gabriel Landeskog. Yes, a lot of guys below him on this list can outscore him, but Landeskog is a beast. Absolute beast on the ice. I would love to see at some point in their careers Barkov and Landeskog on the same line. Nobody else would be allowed to touch the puck anytime they were on the ice. That would be a dominant shift. Landeskog took him a while to come into his own. He's had his setbacks along the way, but I think we're looking at a premier forward. And I think when you look at that first line with where you've got Landeskog, Rantanen, and MacKinnon, it may very well be a dominant best line in the league situation for the Colorado Avalanche this year. We don't know for sure, but it could be, right? That said, number 10, going with a young kid on this one too. Alex DeBrincat. So if we look at the season that Chicago just had, you add Strome to that line, and DeBrincat ends up scoring 40 goals. To me, and I've mentioned this in a video recently, I did it in a video yesterday on the Chicago Blackhawks, DeBrincat's a 50-goal scorer. No doubt in my mind, he's a 50-goal scorer. We've got down the street, there's Canuck fans that'll make the argument that Besser's a 50-goal scorer. I would say 40 is probably about where Besser ends up. DeBrincat's 50. He's fast, he's determined, and despite being smaller than a lot of other players out there, just his heart and soul comes out in every single shift. To me, Alex DeBrincat's fantastic. And that 41 goals is going to be a low mark, I think, over the next 5 years. I think he'll only go up from there. And he seemed to get better as the year went along. Number 9. Going back to Colorado. Current restricted free agent, Mikko Rantanen. Not the only restricted free agent on this board either. Rantanen had an amazing year. He had an amazing first half where he was the leading scorer in the NHL. He cooled off. There was an injury in between. Things cooled off for him. When you look at his stats at the end of the year, still pretty darn good season. And then in the playoffs against the Flames, that line really did quite well, right? I think Rantanen is an underrated forward, just like Timo Meier, who I could give an honorable mention to in this as well. Meier did not make the top 20, but 30-goal scorer, and there's more to come from Timo Meier. Rantanen is an amazing forward, and I had not expected that kind of points total from him. I think it was 87 in 74 games for him. Very, very solid season. I think he was probably better during the first half of the year than we can expect this season, but I think his second half was a little more of a challenge. I think he'll end up with about 92, 93 points overall this coming season, but we'll see. I'm not getting into the fantasy side of things yet. The fantasy side of things we'll do later. That's where people go, wait, who's Shannon predicting? That's what ends up happening. Number 8. All right, number 8. You know, it's funny. Everybody hates Brad Marchand. It's pretty universal that people hate Brad Marchand. Even within Boston Bruins fandom, there are people who can't stand Brad Marchand. When Marchand is doing stupid stuff, I don't like it. Whether it's punching somebody in a scrum in a Columbus matchup, for instance, or whatever he's doing, there's always something going on during any given season that you go, oh, why is Marchand doing that crap? And that's from somebody who's maybe cheering for Boston, because what people forget with Marchand is when he's doing that stupidity, the team's losing. So he's doing it at a time when the team's losing or he's not scoring, and it's a struggle, and he gets mad and it comes out on the ice. If he could cut that completely out of his game, he's top 5. But when he does that kind of crap, it honestly backfires and it hurts the Bruins. This is why when people say, well, you know, he should have got this punishment or that punishment, believe me, the Bruins take a punishment as it is anytime he does something stupid because they're losing. And he's distracting everybody from what's important, which is come back and win, because his own teammates will go over and tell him, cut that crap out. That's not helping us. So he's distracting his own teammates from the task at hand. He hinders the team when that takes place. So that's why, for me, he's not top 5. Otherwise, he'd be there. His numbers over the last 4 or 5 years have been absolutely fantastic. Number 7. Vegas right winger Mark Stone. Stone has really dramatically shot up for me this season. It started in Ottawa. Nobody paid attention when he was in Ottawa. But on a team that everybody knew was a disaster, where he wasn't going to stay, he was putting up some pretty smart plays, and his overall numbers were excellent. Then he gets to Vegas, where everybody's paying attention to him. He stays on that same even keel, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about how great he is everywhere. And there were people on Sportsnet that talked about how great Stone was before he got traded, so I'm not going to say like nobody knew. But it definitely cranked up his visibility going to Vegas from Ottawa. And going from a Centurion on the front of your jersey to a Knight is a relatively gradual change. If he was going to make another gradual change at some point, Kings would work. It's still along that same line, right? But Stone is so good at both ends of the ice. He's very strong. He's a very smart player as well. And when he scores goals, they just seem to always be at the right time. So Stone really, for me, became one of the best players in the league. But again, to me, it was the season he was having in Ottawa as well. If he hadn't been traded to Vegas, he would still be here because he had an amazing year before even going to Vegas, when everybody went, oh, there's that Stone guy. He's pretty good. Now we know. The more you know. Okay. Number 6. And this one was tough. I'm like, okay. So if I'm going to put Draisaitl on the board, because he had a 50-goal season, where am I going to put him? 50-goal season would mean he should be top 2 or top 3. But Draisaitl it was McDavid's fantastic season this year because Draisaitl potted 50. Did Draisaitl pot 50 because of McDavid? And I know people are going to say, well, Shannon, you've defended Draisaitl as a center for when McDavid was out. I agree. But that 50 goals, how many would he have had if he was anchoring his own line? Would it have been 40? And if he was anchoring his own line, he wouldn't be on the board as a winger. So he's not a pure winger. He did play some time at center this year. He does take his share of faceoffs. And ideally for Edmonton, you never want to see him on this board again. You never want to see him as a winger. You want to see him as a second-line center. You look at some of the great teams that have won multiple Stanley Cups, and it's center depth that gets you there. It's depth down the middle. It's when you've got that 1-2-3 punch that teams just can't counter. So they come up with a plan against one line, and then the other line kills them. Draisaitl can be that. He's had the 150-goal season. We can see if he can have another one. I don't see any reason why he won't. The one thing is with Dave Tippett behind the bench, things might get more defensive. They may tighten things up a little bit, and it might be more difficult for Connor McDavid to win an Art Ross trophy or Draisaitl to win the Rocket Richard Award. The thing is, if they tighten things up defensively, it might be easier for them to get into the Stanley Cup playoffs, which is where every Oiler wants to be desperately. Number 5. Yeah, so we're up to 5. We're going into the RFA market again. Mitch Marner. You cannot overestimate Mitch Marner. He had 94 points this past season. Could easily have had 100. His assist totals early in the year were crazy. And he's that good. He's that good of a passer that he can do that time and time again. But that being said, he did hit 94 points. And you get the feeling that he's going to get better. The trick for Marner, of course, is how the RFA holdout works. He has to look at Nylander, who's not on this board. He has to look at what happened with Willie Nylander and say, I don't want to go that same route. I don't think he will. I think we're going to see this get resolved quickly. By quickly, I mean by September, maybe early September, because you want to be in training camp, and the team needs you in training camp. Marner's fantastic. And it's not just passes, it's the fact that a lot of his assists are primary assists. And, you know, the amount of assists he's had where all the goal scorer has to do is just tap it into the empty net is just crazy. He is that talented. He is that good. And to me, honestly, he's probably the best Maple Leaf there is. I understand the argument for Matthews. I can understand an argument for Tavares. I'm saying to me, whether it's the eyeball test or the stats, I would go with Marner as their best player. Just personally. Understanding that centers are normally more highly regarded than wingers. Number 4. Johnny Gaudreau. Johnny Gaudreau, who barely misses 100 points this year, had an amazing season, and that first line with Lindholm and Monahan was great. It really was. And I can't say anything bad about Johnny Gaudreau. Johnny Hockey's very good. He got a bit of a lesson in that first round against Colorado. You can't take your foot off the gas. I don't see that happening to Johnny Hockey again. I think next year Calgary goes into the playoffs. I think they go in as a lower seed. And I think that as an underdog, I think they're better off. They start the playoffs on the road. I think they can play a better game. And Johnny Gaudreau, I would expect, would be about a point per game in the playoffs from here on, because he had a rough playoff against Colorado. You don't forget that kind of a beating in the first round. At least you better not, because if you're the kind of player that, it's fine. If you do the whole Yashin thing, which is year on year, he never seemed to get that intensity level raised in the playoffs, eventually teams move on from you. Gaudreau is not in any danger of that at any time soon. Number 3. Yeah, this is where it gets tricky. Nikita Kucherov. So, Kucherov has 128 points this year. All right. Leads the league in scoring. Excellent. Most points anybody's had in a long time. Agreed. Monster season. Yep. And he's got a temper. Yep. Can he get suspended? Absolutely. Kucherov for me is fantastic. And as a point producer, yeah, he was the best this year, but I cannot have him as the best winger. Because points tell one tale, and he's got the one Art Ross trophy. Now, if he wins another scoring title next year, and if he can cut out some of the other crap that for me knocks him down a little bit, so, you know, some of the borderline stuff when he's frustrated, that kind of stuff, I think he could be number 1 on this board next summer, but he's got to cut some of that crap out. You can't be the best player on the ice and then have a bad temper that leads to a ridiculous incident like that. So, yeah, to me that bumps him down. Number 2. You know, the fun thing with this list is there's people who won't know where I'm going with this. Alex Ovechkin. So Ovechkin's 50 goals this year might get overlooked because Washington gets eliminated in the first round. But he had the Stanley Cup in 2018. He was fantastic. And honestly, a 50-goal scorer again. Another Rocket Richard trophy. And I can argue that Ovechkin scores 50 again this year, and nobody's really going to quibble with that too much. You're not going to hear the argument of, well, he's getting in his mid-30s. He's not going to score 50 again because it's Ovechkin. The Great 8 has been absolutely amazing, and he seems to get better as he gets older. And in a playoff game, if it's a Game 7, I have to choose between these two Russian players, I'm going to take Ovechkin. And that to me is the reality of why I would have Ovechkin ahead of Kucherov, even after the season Kucherov had. Great year for Nikita Kucherov. Absolutely amazing. I would still take Ovechkin in a Game 7 situation. Which is why, for number 1, Chicago's Patrick Kane. Yep. There are going to be people who argue about that. But, man, Patrick Kane scares the hell out of me. When the Hawks went on that really amazing run down the stretch, that was Patrick Kane. Patrick Kane can almost will that team into the playoffs. Taves is excellent. DeBrincat, as I mentioned before, could be a 50-goal scorer as soon as this season. But Patrick Kane is so strong, and he doesn't seem to be showing any signs of aging. It's really aggravating to people who may not cheer for Chicago. But Patrick Kane just seems to keep getting better as he gets older and smarter. I understand there are people who may not like him for some things that have happened in off-ice incidents and this kind of thing. But when you watch him on the ice, he's a poet with that puck. Like, he is absolutely mind-blowing to me, and to me he is the best winger in the National Hockey League. So there you go. My top 20. If there's anybody else that I missed as an honorable mention, here they are now. And there's my end of ranking players by position. There'll be other top 10s and top whatever else coming up over the next week and a half until we go to Vegas. And even in Vegas, I will be doing countdown videos and stuff because we've got too many whiteboards that my wife picked up that will fit into my check bag. So there are whiteboards going to Vegas, as well as magnets and markers. So even when we go on holidays, I'm still here making videos for you guys. Well, not here, but in Vegas making videos, talking to you guys. There you go. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your list. All that other wonderful stuff. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, it's all in good fun. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.